everyone, and welcome to today's PHO Rounds presentation on the Ontario Early Adversity and Resilience Framework from Research to Action. My name is Sarah Carsley. I'm an Applied Public Health Science Specialist, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and respect the land, sky, and waters of Ontario, including for their contribution and sharing to support all life within. I acknowledge and respect the treaty, unceded, and traditional territories of all First Nations across these lands and waters. I would like to acknowledge that I am in Toronto, on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Please join me in acknowledgement and respect of all Indigenous peoples, their life journeys, and worldviews. May their wisdom always guide our own paths forward with open hands, open hearts, and open minds for the mutual success and benefit for all in Ontario. It is now my pleasure to introduce the speakers for today's presentation. Emily Martin is a project manager leading the development of a Toronto Public Health plan on working with partners to prevent adverse childhood experiences and building community resilience through programs, policies, and partnerships. Karina Boateng is a public health nurse with expertise in early childhood health, equity, and resilience. She co-authored the Ontario Early Adversity and Resilience Framework and is currently leading the Durham Region Health Department strategy to integrate the framework across the Population Health Division, beginning with staff training and capacity building. Kate Dunford is a public health nurse focused on addressing the impact of early adversity and resilience on family and community health. With over 10 years of experience, Kate works alongside community to implement preventative strategies, promote resilience, and has contributed to provincial and local research, including co-authoring the Ontario Early Adversity and Resilience Framework. Thank you all for being here today, and I will now pass it over to Karina.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for that introduction, Sarah. My name is Karina Boateng, and I'm presenting today alongside Kate Dunford and Emily Martin. And we're looking forward to sharing the Ontario Early Adversity and Resilience Framework with you all in this presentation on behalf of the Public Health Ontario Adverse Childhood Experiences and Resilience Community of Practice Framework Working Group. So this presentation was created by its authors. It will be published on the Public Health Ontario website for public use as outlined in Public Health Ontario's website terms of use. Public Health Ontario is not the owner of this content, and any application or use of the information in this document is the responsibility of the user. Public Health Ontario assumes no liability resulting from any such application or use, and the presenters do not have any conflicts of interest to disclose. We felt the need to include a sensitive content warning as this presentation does include topics related to early adversity, including adverse childhood experiences, trauma, neglect, and abuse. Some content may be emotionally challenging or triggering, so please prioritize your well-being, take breaks as needed, seek support, and engage in ways that feel safe for you. If you need resources or assistance, please reach out to a trusted support service. Our goal from this presentation is that by the end, you are each able to describe the concepts of early adversity and resilience, recognize early adversity and resilience as key public health issues, summarize the components of the OEAR framework, and identifies ways to apply the framework within your own organizations or communities. So the framework was compiled by a working group of the ACES and Resilience Community of Practice, which was convened by Public Health Ontario in January of 2023. The ACER COP is made up of public health practitioners, community partners, and leaders from across Ontario. The main goal of the COP is to foster collaboration and networking to enhance public health-related early adversity and resilience initiatives across Ontario. It aims to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, best practices, and evidence-based interventions that foster healthier individuals, families, and communities. During the development of the framework and as we engage with it today, we found it important to reflect on our positionality and how we identify how our identities, experiences, and beliefs shape our understanding. Our positionality influences how we perceive adversity, resilience, and systemic inequities. It affects what we prioritize and whose voices we center and how we interpret findings. We invite you to pause and consider how your backgrounds and beliefs shape your engagement with this framework and this topic. For the working group members, we have a shared identity as Canadian-born women working in public health. We recognize that our understanding is informed by, but also limited to, our unique journeys, including experiences with adversity, parenting or caregiving, and relationships. This critical reflection helps foster respect, inclusion, and meaningful change. So let's carry this mindset as we move forward throughout the presentation. In line with reflecting on our positionality, we knew that when we approached this work from a public health lens, that it was important to hear from other sectors to see if the framework resonated with their experiences too. We're so grateful to all the individuals and organizations who took the time to share their insights, expertise, and provide thoughtful feedback. It truly helped shape and strengthen the final version of the framework. Childhood experiences, both positive and negative, shape a child's development and can have lasting impacts throughout their life. In this section, we're going to talk about the science behind how this happens. So we'll start with the difference between ACEs and early adversity and how we've chosen to define each of these terms within the framework. ACEs are defined as stressful and potentially traumatic events occurring before the age of 18. The term usually refers to a specific set of 10 early adversities identified in the original ACEs study, including abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. With advancing research, it has been recognized that those 10 experiences are not a comprehensive list. And in fact, any early adversity leading to extreme or chronic stress can disrupt a child's brain and organ development and can lead to poor health and behavioral outcomes across the lifespan, including increased risk of substance use, mental health disorders, chronic disease, and premature death. To ensure that when we're talking about ACEs, it includes the additional forms of adversity, the members of this working group made the decision to use early adversity in the title of this report, as this better encompasses our broad understanding of what may constitute as trauma and adversity early in life. You'll notice both early adversity and ACEs used throughout the text in this framework. One of the key messages in the framework is that early adversity is shaped by more than just what happens at home. It's deeply connected to the social determinants of health. We now understand ACEs as occurring across three realms. There's household level adversity, including abuse, neglect, and household dysfunctions, what we often think of as the traditional ACEs. There's community level adversity, which reflects the conditions people live in, such as poverty, discrimination, housing instability, community violence, and lack of access to services. And there's environmental level adversity, including broader forces like climate change and natural disasters, which disproportionately impact equity-deserving communities. All of these are influenced by the social determinants of health and also reflect the intergenerational impacts of trauma, such as those caused by colonialism, racism, and systemic inequity. By understanding adversity through this broader lens, we can better address root causes, support families, and promote resilience across households, communities, and systems. ACEs are prevalent. Both international and national data show that about 6 in 10 people have experienced at least one, and around 12 to 16% have faced 4 or more, which puts them at higher risk for negative outcomes. In Canada, we don't have as much ACE-specific data, but what we do have tells a similar story. In 2013, an Alberta study found that over half of participants had at least one ACE. A more recent national survey in 2018 looked at child maltreatment and found that 6 in 10 reported experiencing some form of it before the age of 15. In Ontario, a local survey in Wellington, Dufferin, and Guelph showed an even higher number. 81% had at least one ACE, and 31% had 4 or more. The numbers are clear. ACEs affect a large portion of the population, reinforcing the need for prevention and support systems. Although early adversity clearly affects a lot of people, systemic factors like colonialism, racism, and other forms of oppression can increase the risk. When people face multiple systemic inequities, the challenges multiply, leading to even higher levels of adverse experiences. Research shows that groups such as Indigenous peoples, Black and racialized individuals, immigrants and refugees, women, those in the 2S LGBTQ+ community, children with specialized care needs, youth in the criminal justice system, and those from low-income households are at greater risk. Having 4 or more ACEs is also more common among populations with a history of mental health issues, substance use or addiction, and unhoused individuals. Intergenerational trauma is a key part of this story. For example, the effects of colonization and residential schools have long-lasting impacts on Indigenous families, affecting parenting and overall well-being. This is not an exhaustive list, and more research needs to be completed to identify additional groups at increased risk. Despite these challenges, many of these communities also have powerful strengths such as strong family ties, cultural traditions, and community resilience, which serve as important protective factors. That's why it's so crucial to involve those with lived experience in shaping solutions. When communities lead the way, policies and programs become more tailored, effective, and respectful of their unique needs and strengths. ACEs often happen together, and the more ACEs a person experiences, the higher the risk for developing poor health outcomes. It's a dose-response relationship. As ACEs increase, so does the risk for future health problems like depression, anxiety, heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, along with behaviors such as substance use, poor diet, and low physical activity. In adults, having 4 or more ACEs makes individuals 12 times more likely to face issues like substance use, depression, and even suicide attempts. With 6 or more ACEs, the risk of premature death can be up to 20 years earlier than average. Stress is the key mechanism that links adversity to long-term impacts on health and development. We can think about stress in 3 categories. There's positive stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress, and each affects the body differently. So positive stress is brief and manageable. It happens when kids face everyday challenges like the first day of school, and this kind of stress actually helps strengthen coping skills and resilience. Tolerable stress is more intense and comes from difficult experiences like losing a loved one. The body's stress response is stronger, but with the support of a caring adult, it can be brought back to baseline. Over time, this buffering effect helps protect the brain and body from lasting harm. Toxic stress is what we need to be most concerned about. This happens when a child is exposed to severe, prolonged, or repeated adversity, things like chronic neglect, abuse, exposure to violence, or persistent poverty, without the support of a stable, responsive caregiver. In these cases, the stress response stays activated for too long, flooding the body with stress hormones and affecting the brain and organs over time, increasing the risk of serious health problems across the lifespan. It's not just stress itself that determines the impact, it's whether children have the support they need to manage it. Caring, responsive relationships can help regulate the stress response, protecting children from harm and setting them up for healthier lives. This highlights the importance of policies and programs that support caregivers who can help protect children from toxic stress during times of adversity. Toxic stress has many impacts on the developing systems, including the structure and function of the developing brain, affecting things like executive function, learning, memory, and emotional regulation. It also impacts stress regulation and the ability to manage, respond to, and recover from stress. Immune system function is affected as chronic inflammation increases vulnerability to infections and autoimmune disorders. Effects on the endocrine and cardiometabolic systems include higher risks of hypertension, insulin resistance, and disrupted hormone regulation. And early adversity can influence gene expression, affecting cognition, behavior, and overall health through epigenetic changes. The changes to the brain and body that can occur from experiencing adversity increase the risk for serious chronic health conditions, mental health conditions, and substance use disorders, as well as health risk behaviors, and can also affect social outcomes. As mentioned previously, as the number of ACEs increases, so does the risk of these outcomes. So we often do hear that resilience is what helps people overcome challenges. But what does that really mean? Resilience isn't just about bouncing back from hardship. When it comes to the earliest adversity, there may not be a before to bounce back to. Resilience is really about adapting, recovering, and even thriving despite stress or adversity. And it isn't just something you're born with or that you develop on your own. It's a process that depends on our relationships, experiences, and the environment around us, and the ability to navigate to and negotiate for resources. The connections we feel to family, friends, community, and culture are protective factors that build resilience together. And for children, even one nurturing, supportive relationship with a caring adult can lay the foundation for resilience, helping them do well despite significant adversity. But resilience isn't just about individuals, it's also about communities. A resilient community is one that works together to create and sustain the resources people need to thrive. When a community has strong relationships, access to support systems, and inclusive structures, it can better respond to challenges and reduce adversity for its members. Whether at an individual or community level, resilience is built through relationships, access to resources, and the ability to shape environments that promote well-being. There are a number of interrelated concepts that have been studied in the literature to describe building resilience. And we're going to go over some of the differences and similarities between these concepts now. So the first is early relational health. This refers to the first positive, nurturing relationships between caregivers and infants or toddlers. These early connections are crucial as they support brain development, regulate stress, and promote well-being for children and adults. They promote secure attachment, build a foundation for emotional and intellectual growth, and protect children from stress. Interestingly, high-quality adult-child interactions benefit both the child and adult, fostering brain, emotional, and physical health. Next is SSNRs, or safe, stable, and nurturing relationships. So these are relationships that provide security, consistency, and emotional support, buffering children against stress and adversity throughout childhood. These relationships are built on early relational health and are essential for fostering positive childhood experiences. Through these connections, children learn about the world around them, explore, and meet challenges with support. Positive experiences go beyond SSNRs, expanding to include opportunities for learning, developing social and emotional skills, and engaging in safe, supportive, and equitable environments. These experiences, such as stable housing, quality education, and community involvement, build on the foundations laid by early relational health and SSNRs, further strengthening resilience. Together, early relational health, SSNRs, and positive experiences act as protective factors, which are characteristics, conditions, or resources that reduce the impacts of adversity and promote resilience at the individual, family, and community levels. However, it is crucial to recognize that systemic inequities like poverty, racism, and discrimination can limit access to these protective factors. One very important piece of this is that adversity is not destiny. With the right support and interventions, individuals can heal, grow, and thrive despite past challenges. Trauma and violence-informed care is one way that communities can help individuals overcome adversity by fostering safety, empowerment, and healing. There's no single universally accepted model of this, but newer versions take into account the broader social conditions that influence health. Trauma and violence-informed care helps create safe environments and strengthens interventions by acknowledging how trauma impacts health and behavior. By shifting the focus from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, and even what's wrong with you, this approach reduces harm and fosters trust, safety, and empowerment through choice and collaboration. For more information on the science of early adversity and resilience, you can complete the Community Resilience Core Training at communityresilience.ca by the Community Resilience Coalition of Guelph and Wellington. And I'm just going to pass it off to Kate.
Hi, everyone. We're excited to introduce you all to the finalized framework. So here we'll go through more detail about the different components and tools throughout the document. So first, to give you insight into how the framework came together, we'd like to walk you through the 4 key steps our working group followed. This process reflects a careful balance of evidence, community input, and Ontario-specific context. We began by identifying and analyzing existing frameworks in the literature related to ACEs, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, while also considering our goals for the framework, evidence-based core concepts, as well as feedback received from the larger ACEs and resilience community practice. And following this, we decided to adopt Fraser Health's health promotion strategy to prevent ACEs and build resilience in children, family, and communities. With that foundation, we made several adaptations to better reflect Ontario's unique context. So these included also adding a pathway to change called Lessening Harm, focused on harm reduction through a trauma and violence-informed lens. We also conducted scoping reviews to refine focus areas, goals, and objectives, incorporated Ontario-based references and statistics, and emphasized collective action and community responsibility, as well as adding strategic actions and evidence-based interventions related to support implementation. We then shared a working draft with senior leadership from our health units and 2 Northern health units as well, and their feedback helped refine the draft further, which we then shared with 31 external reviewers with expertise in adversity and resilience. So we carefully prioritized and integrated the feedback to ensure that the framework was both rigorous and relevant. The third draft was finalized and graphically designed to be ready to share. And to support knowledge translation, we also created a 2-page graphic summary for broader accessibility, and at the same time developed a communications plan to guide how the framework would be shared. So this 4-step process really helped ensure the framework was grounded in evidence, shaped by community, and really tailored for action in Ontario. It reflects not just what we know, but how we can move forward together. The science behind ACEs isn't new, though it continues to evolve. We do know that many organizations are already familiar with these concepts, but at the same time, we saw a need for greater attention to this work and for practical tools that help people consider what kinds of interventions can truly make a difference. Our goal here was to really bring a lot of the research together in one place, just to highlight how important it is and to also support collective thinking and action. First, we wanted it to promote evidence-based strategies at all socio-ecological levels to prevent adversity and promote resilience. Next, we wanted the framework to explain complex concepts to really make them more accessible and easier to understand. We really hoped that this would build a shared understanding and a common language around the drivers and impacts of adversity and ways to build community resilience, which would then encourage community action that fosters collective responsibility and cross-sector partnerships, with the hope that we can increase impact together to strengthen the effectiveness of initiatives that really address adversity and resilience. So since the framework was a long report, the working group really developed a visual representation of the framework, which is what you're looking at now. The graphic uses the metaphor of connected communities to show how children and families can address adversity and build resilience. So at the center, the white circle, is the main goal, representing kind of the heart of the framework, which is to increase community and family resilience and decrease adversity. And this is surrounded by 4 key focus areas, which are represented in the square. These focus areas really target essential aspects of children's development and family well-being. The focus areas show where action is needed and include socially connected, equitable, and inclusive communities, social and emotional development and resilience, reproductive health and parenting and caregiving readiness, and responsive and culturally safe parenting and caregiving. The focus areas are grounded in a strong foundation made up of 10 guiding principles, which are listed here and represented as the brown words surrounding the square. So examples from this include across the life course, evidence-informed, and strength and resilience-based. The principles represent the core values of the framework, providing stability and shaping how actions are carried out. The third component of the framework are the 5 pathways to change, which are shown as the outer circle encapsulating the principles and focus areas, and shown as roads connecting communities. The roads symbolize how change moves and spreads, creating links between people and places. And the 5 pathways to change are shifting social norms, integrating upstream strategies, influencing healthy public policy, intervening to lessen harm, and collecting and utilizing data. They provide a purposeful means to implementing effective interventions within the focus areas, and together each of these elements really creates a comprehensive approach to building resilience. So now we're going to delve a bit further into each focus area. So starting with the first one, socially connected, equitable, and inclusive communities. This focus area really aims to recognize that children's health and development are significantly influenced by their immediate social environment, the built environment, and natural environments, as well as systemic factors that shape those environments. The goal is that children, youth, and families thrive in healthy communities that are safe, connected, equitable, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. Some of the key outcomes for this area include a shared responsibility for well-being, enhanced social and cultural connections, family-friendly and accessible built environments, and equity-centered policies. The second focus area is social and emotional development and resilience, and really brings attention to the fact that childhood is a fundamental time for the development of lifelong social and emotional competence and resilience, which equips children with the skills to manage stress, build healthy relationships, and adapt to challenges. The goal here is that children and youth are supported through social and emotional development to build healthy relationships. And key outcomes of this focus area include increased access to SED resources, including infant and early mental health, expanded access to affordable, high-quality childcare, well-resourced and trauma-informed schools, and better ways to measure SED outcomes as well. Focus Area 3 is reproductive health and parenting and caregiving readiness, which recognizes that access to comprehensive reproductive health services and perinatal support, including family planning and prenatal care, really empowers individuals and families to make informed decisions about pregnancy and parenting. And also that emotional, psychological, physical, and practical preparedness are the key to fostering early relational health and safe, supportive environments for children. By strengthening support systems and prioritizing perinatal mental health, families can really build their capacity and confidence and foster positive parent-child relationships, which promote long-term well-being. Some of the outcomes from this focus area include informed decision-making, access to reproductive health, preconception and perinatal care, and including enhanced support for those who experience perinatal mood disorders. So finally, the last area is responsive and culturally safe parenting and caregiving. And this focus area builds on the fact that parents and caregivers are often the most important and influential part of a child's life, shaping their overall health and well-being, but also centers on the fact that parents have to be well for children to be well. And this is why the goal here is to provide support for families to reduce sources of stress, including things like affordability, strengthen core skills, and support responsive and nurturing relationships while honoring cultural practices and traditions. Some outcomes of this focus area include implementing equitable, culturally safe, and family supportive policies, enhancing access to family support programs, and strengthening core skills. This focus area also touches on violence prevention as well as child welfare. Each of the 4 focus areas contain a strategic action table. The strategies in the action tables are based on current research evidence, promising practices, as well as expert feedback. And strategies are identified within each level of the social ecological model, so child and youth, family, community, and society, and across each of the 5 pathways to change. They give communities really a starting point to create culturally relevant programs that build resilience and prevent ACEs. And the strategies are meant to offer a range of options. So starting with broad goals and to very specific actions. And the goal of this is to allow communities to really adapt them based on their resources, capacity, and what their local needs are. So this is an example from the socially connected, equitable, and inclusive communities focus area, and under the pathway of integrate upstream strategies. So here you can see that the potential interventions are organized by pathway and social ecological level. And an example of actions at the child and youth level and family level might look like integrating social prescribing into practice, while actions at the community and society level include advocating for equitable access to green spaces to allow for unstructured outdoor play in nature. And wherever possible, we also included links to resources throughout the document. So for example, the social prescribing link to make it easier for readers to access. And one more example is from the social and emotional development and resilience focus area table under the pathway of shifting social norms. So actions at the family level here might look like utilizing programs like the 4th R to help teach children, youth, and families how to create safe and healthy relationships and manage their emotions. And actions at the community and society level include creating community-specific infant and early mental health care pathways to ensure timely and appropriate support for infants and young children with mental health or developmental challenges. And as I mentioned, we're hopeful that these help provide examples and guidance for how to implement the framework in your organization or community. So one more feature of the framework document is that it includes sections designed to encourage reflection, critical thinking, and continuous learning. So building on the positionality reflection that we shared in the beginning, we've incorporated sections throughout the document to really help you engage with key concepts, to deepen your understanding, and to really share resources that will enhance your learning journey. So in addition to the reflections, we also have resources to support meaningful action boxes throughout. And these sections provide additional materials to enhance understanding on specific topics, highlight key issues, or really guide further learning as well. And so this slide is just a few examples from the framework of those boxes. So now that the framework's been finalized and published, our focus is on sparking action across the province by supporting its integration into practice. And to make the framework more accessible, we developed a number of knowledge translation tools, including that 2-page graphic summary, and we're currently working on topic-specific summaries and an integration tool to support application in different settings. We've also shared the framework widely, so presenting at several forums, including the Ontario Public Health Convention and the Expanding Horizons Conference. And the framework was also recently endorsed by ALPHA, the Association of Local Public Health Agencies in Ontario, who's advocated for the framework to be incorporated into provincial public health policy and to be a foundational document across related ministries. So importantly, we're all working together to empower communities to lead this work by building capacity as well, offering consultations and sharing knowledge across networks too. So the full framework and graphic summary are available at earlyadversityandresilience.ca. And I'm going to pass it over to Emily to talk about the application.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here today. So we've talked a lot about the history and the science behind early adversity, and we've talked about the framework. And now we're going to talk about how to apply the framework into your roles and organizations. So one of the key messages we've included throughout the document and in the graphic summary is the idea that everyone has a shared responsibility to foster children's potential and to build family and community resilience. The idea that we can all add positive supports or protective factors onto families. So we're hoping that this framing can help with encouraging a life course approach, as well as the idea of collective action and collaboration. The framework's intended to be a call to action for communities to work across sectors and across the life course to develop innovative and meaningful solutions that prevent adversity, strengthen protective factors, build resilience, and support healing in families and communities. So this is really about, in the context of public health, when we think about our own role, for those of us who work in public health, the alignment's very clear. Early adversity and resilience is a critical public health issue, and addressing it is a powerful primordial prevention strategy. Now, primordial prevention is all about addressing the underlying factors, economic, social, environmental, that create risks in the first place. And by focusing on these drivers and working upstream, we can prevent or reduce the impacts of early adversity. And we can help communities create the conditions where families have the support they need to prevent or mitigate effects of early adversity and to build resilience. So focusing on families and children has impacts across the life course. Even if you don't work directly with families in your work, that's why this is important. And it provides an opportunity where if we change the beginning of the story, we can change the whole story. For our public health friends on the call, the other connection is that the Ontario Early Adversity and Resilience Framework provides us with a tool to help action the Ontario public health standards across health units in Ontario. So when you're talking about the framework at your health units, you can share that it provides a template for comprehensive health promotion strategy and that it targets primordial prevention, that it uses evidence-based population-level strategies, that it provides opportunities for collaboration and partnership between public health units and community partners across all different sectors, that it has the ability to tailor to local needs, local resources, local priorities, and that it uses an upstream approach that supports long-lasting outcomes. Now, we're hoping to have some clinical folks on the call as well today. And so we wanted to make sure to pull out some space to reflect for folks who are in the clinical or healthcare contexts. When we bring this work into clinical settings, the framework can help us guide care in ways that are both upstream and practical for everyday practice. So for clinicians, this means, first of all, it could be embedding equity and trauma and violence-informed care in our interactions with patients. That could be that could include providing trauma and violence-informed care training for the staff, or it could look like working to embed anti-racist practices by modifying structures and policies. For example, ensuring that staff and board members reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. Another way this could look is strengthening referral and communication pathways, improving those connections between primary care, mental health, schools, and family supports so that children and youth with developmental or behavioral concerns don't fall through the cracks. It also means thinking about prioritizing mental health and early relational health, supporting families during those times of pregnancy, early childhood, and helping caregivers to build strong, safe, and nurturing relationships with their children. This could include training such as Mount Sinai's Keystones of Development training, for instance. As well, this could mean expanding access to evidence-based supports. For example, integrating social prescribing into practice or applying inclusive perinatal care tools like the PCMCH tip sheet to better support 2S LGBTQIA+ families during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. It could also mean partnering with families and communities, recognizing that health outcomes improve when families feel supported, engaged, and empowered in their own care. Basically, the framework provides a lens for clinicians to adapt what they're already doing, ensuring that care not only addresses immediate needs, but also reduces the long-term impacts of early adversity and strengthens resilience. We thought it would also be helpful for folks to identify how you can use the framework within your organizations and within a broader community to drive change provincially and locally. So some examples, it can be used to shape provincial health and social service strategies, as we talked about alignment with the public health standards. It can shape strategies and support planning, integrating it into strategic planning. It can foster cross-sectoral collaboration as a shared resource, can facilitate provincial collaboration, as well as facilitating research and strategic partnerships. It can support population health assessment by assisting in selecting and prioritizing indicators. It can guide project development, and it can also be used to guide municipal planning, helping local governments integrate the strategic actions. But really, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever makes the most sense for your community to mobilize the strategies within the framework. So in thinking of next steps you can take, we want to think about sort of how you can move this forward. So in our own health units, we've taken different approaches to embedding the framework. For instance, in Toronto, we've been undertaking an audit of the Ontario Early Adversity and Resilience Framework against our current programs, policies, and practices to identify how our current work already prevents ACEs and builds resilience, and what key opportunities there are through our partnerships and enhancing programs to deepen the work in 2026. So thinking of your own context, some of the next steps you can take to get started are review the framework. This is a great step. You've been at this session today. And then you can reflect with your team on what the framework means to your work. There's a few example questions here on the slide. In this context, you can define team however it makes sense. It might be your whole division, it could be a smaller program team, or it could be a broad community coalition. And then plan for which actions you can prioritize in your work. So that's our last slide. Thank you guys so much for the participation. We saw hearts and claps coming up, which means a lot. Thank you for engaging with our activities. And we're going to hand it back to Sarah now for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Emily, Karina, Kate, for that very insightful presentation. We will now move into the Q&A segment to answer questions from our live audience. So please, a quick reminder to everyone, if you have not already, please enter your questions in the Q&A pod. And while we wait for those to ask some questions, I will ask one of my own. What do you foresee, and this is to all three of you, might be a main challenge in the implementation of this framework?
So I can start answering that, and then Kate and Karina can chime in.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a big issue, right? And so early adversity and resilience touches a lot of sectors, touches a lot of different pieces of work across public health. And I think sometimes that can feel daunting for people because it's all, when you start looking, it's all interconnected. But I think that was exactly why we made the framework, was to give people some of those, a place to start, to look and say, okay, if I do at least this, I know that I'm already doing this work. And I found it really encouraging to see how much of it is work that we already do in public health contexts or in other community sectors. So a big part of it is retelling that story. All these things we already do, this is preventing ACEs and building resilience. And then the other piece, a piece of feedback that I got right when I started this work from folks who've done it in other municipalities, was just push on the doors that are slightly open. So don't go to the place that has no interest in working with you, but think about where there's someone who sees this resonance, who's already doing this work, and engage with them. And I think that that creates a real opportunity for a topic that can seem quite big and daunting.
Thank you so much. Kate or Karina, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I can add that to that as well. I think there's lots of different people on the call today, and one thing that might be difficult sometimes is getting buy-in from leadership to kind of move these things forward. And so being able to have those conversations, getting buy-in at that leadership level really helps it move forward at an organization level. We're actually working on a topic summary to help people have those conversations, to kind of outline some of those key speaking points that might help you bring this to leadership, and then again move this action forward really in your organization or community or wherever you're at.
Wonderful. So we do have a question from the Q&A pod. This is very comprehensive and has much potential. Totally agree. Can you expand on what intervene to lessen harm might look like practically or in a real life scenario?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think that there's a lot of ideas for this in the strategic action tables, but some of the things that come to mind are the idea of the trauma and violence informed care and environments for people. So this is understanding that people may have already experienced adversity. So what can we do to avoid re-traumatizing them? What can we do to pile on those protective factors to increase support for them to hopefully reduce the impact that that adversity has on them over time? Other ideas for that are related to things like in the justice system, things related to child welfare. How can we really work with families who are experiencing adversity to lessen harm, really? So how can we get them the supports that they need for addiction? How can we get them the supports that we need for dealing with or leaving in intimate partner violence situations? Things like that is kind of what we feel like is in this intervene to lessen harm pathway.
Great, thank you.
I'll
Emily?
just piggyback on that briefly to say, if you want to know more, take a look at the framework, because each of the 4 focus areas has those intervene to lessen harm actions outlined at all the socioecological levels. So that's a great place to look and see what resonates with your work.
Yeah.
Great. Our next question is, what opportunities do you see for this framework to support health research?
I can try again, if that's okay. I think that there's lots of ways that we can use it to see kind of how these protective factors and the way that we work together as a community does make health impacts over time. So long term, the impact on chronic health conditions should be measurable if communities are able to provide support for families. From a research perspective as well, we could look at how implementation is occurring in cities or in across community coalitions, and how really communities can work together if we make like child development and focusing on the early years a priority, because often it's not a priority in our society. So we tend to focus on the things that are right up front and causing harm right away. But if we look further upstream, and hopefully the framework gives us kind of a tool to do that, we can potentially change outcomes doing that. So feel free to add, Karina and Emily, as well.
I can ask another question because they're coming in fast and furious now into the Q&A pod. Recognizing need for early recognition and referral for intervention is hampered by lack of interventionists, e.g. an NP referring for language delay assessment, but there is a 1-year wait list for speech and language programs. Public Health in Ontario provide very limited intervention ourselves. What bridging options could be implemented to overcome this?
So I'll chime in. I wish I had a magic wand answer to this, because this is kind of the million-dollar question, right? We're shining a light on a complex situation in a very complex environment that we all work in. My hope, and what I've been exploring in terms of models from other places, is where you can do this in a smaller scale. I feel like sometimes we want to look at an entire system and fix it, and it's just so hard to even get started. But are there opportunities where, and this is what part of the reason place-based approaches are there in the framework, is there an opportunity where at a neighborhood level you could identify that there's a specific gap, whether it's speech language pathology, whether it's family kind of based counseling, and you could do a pilot, you could do an initial intervention, give it some time, don't give it 6 months. Like, let's be real, because this is all relational work, where you say, we're going to put a little bit of investment into this community in a way we're not doing other places, and we're going to measure what the impact of that investment is. And now having all these different ways of thinking about early adversity and resilience, are those safe, stable, nurturing relationships going up? Are families feeling more connected? All of those pieces. And then how can we, because we're networked provincially, do a pilot like that in a coordinated way, in a rural area, in an urban area, in a different place, and then say, in all these cases, we saw this impact move. And so use that to leverage to make the case for investing differently in the future. That's one way, but it's an excellent question because it is a reality of the system that we're in right now.
Yeah, I would just like to add to that. I think that's great, Emily. And some of the ways that communities can do this is through like coalitions that they have, like their planning tables or different coalitions, because we know that part of this is related to advocacy, right? Advocating to governments for more funding, for increased use of resources. But what can we do if we don't have that in this environment? And one of the things that you could do potentially is to bring community partners together to really try to reorganize existing resources to make them work better for families. And so that could be done through partnerships or through sharing programs in the community, different creative ways to try to make fill the gaps that you're seeing in your community related to these wait lists, because we know that wait lists are a problem across all child development sectors for sure.
Thank
And
you.
sorry, if you
Go
don't
ahead,
mind, if
Karina.
I can chime in on this too. I just wanted to provide it like an example of this as well. Because yes, I agree. There's so many items where there are huge wait lists and there's gaps in services. And just that I want to provide a tangible example for this. So for example, at our health unit, there is a huge shortage of mental health supports. And specifically in like the perinatal period. So we've offered like a steps to wellness program where parents who are in the postpartum period can come in and it's like a group course, and they can get cognitive behavioral therapy there. And it's just an example of one way that you could look at your local community, see where there are gaps in services, and if there is capacity, provide those services as well. And there's lots of those examples in the framework too.
Great, thank you. And thank you for providing that excellent example. We have another question that's kind of aligned with what you were discussing around the community coalitions, but are there digital nonprofit groups who are leading ACE's work that PHUs may refer to the community, like for free counseling, for example?
I know there exist some things, but I don't have one that's coming to the top of my mind.
Okay. Ontario is a ginormous province, so there are likely things happening, but I would refer back to the framework too to see how to engage with those. Would that be correct?
I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question then. How might access to mentors in the community, formal and informal, contribute to strengthening protective factors?
I think that's a huge piece. I mean, I'll leave it to Kate and Karina to say more, but I know organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters, any of those spaces that are providing those, it doesn't have to be the parent. Ideally, it's the parent, but where are those opportunities where it's somebody else, where it's a coach, where it's a bus driver, where it's, any of those people that children interact with and can have those safe relationships is a huge piece of this work. And thinking about the community resilience core training is a really useful tool for that in terms of helping folks understand, these things that they may do in their relationships with young people that they don't think are important, but are actually the whole story of making that safe space for them to be and having that sense of belonging. So I think it's vital.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for that incredibly great presentation, very beautifully presented, and the framework is phenomenal, so congratulations. As we wrap up today's PHO round session, I'd like to thank Karina, Kate, and Emily for presenting. I would also like to thank everyone who joined us for today's event. You can expect to receive a brief and anonymous survey for today's session. Please try to complete this to help us improve our programming. Thank you and have a wonderful day.